scream tore through the afternoon air like a knife through silk. Neighbors would later say they heard it from 3 compounds away. Some said it sounded like a woman being torn apart by spirits. Others swore they heard the sizzle of burning flesh beneath the cry. But on that day, when the sound first pierced the quiet village of humans, everyone froze, spoons halfway to mouths, cloths halfway to washing lines, words halfway out of throats. Something terrible had just happened in Chike's house. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Every story has a beginning, and this one begins not with screaming, but with smiles. Welcome to TJ Stories, where we bring you tales from the heart of Africa, stories of love, betrayal, justice, and the lessons our ancestors whispered around the fire. Subscribe and join our family, because today's story will shake you to your bones. 3 months before that scream, Amara arrived at her brother's compound with nothing but a small bag and a heart full of hope. She was 24 years old, with skin the color of rich earth after rain and eyes that carried kindness like a lantern carries light. Her movements were gentle, her voice soft, her laughter rare but beautiful when it came. The kind of woman elders called well-raised, the kind mothers wanted their sons to marry. But Amara's life had not been gentle. She had lost her job at the tailor's shop in the city when Madame Ngozi closed the business without warning. 6 months of unpaid wages disappeared like smoke, and Amara's savings, already thin from supporting her aging mother, vanished completely. Her mother had recently passed, leaving Amara alone in the world except for one person, her older brother Chike. Chike was a good man. Everyone in Humans said so. He worked as a civil servant in the local government office, earned a decent salary, and had built a fine 4-room house with a zinc roof that gleamed in the sun. He had married Belinda 2 years earlier, and though they had no children yet, people said it was only a matter of time before the ancestors blessed them. When Chike heard of Amara's troubles, he didn't hesitate. "My sister, you will come and stay with us," he said over the phone, his voice warm with brotherly affection. "What is family for if not to help each other? Belinda and I have enough space. You will stay until you find your feet again." Amara wept with gratitude. She had been sleeping on a friend's floor, eating once a day, praying for a miracle. Chike's invitation felt like the hand of God reaching down. She arrived on a bright Saturday morning, carrying her bag and a basket of fruit as a gift. Chike met her at the gate, his face splitting into a wide smile. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered with their father's strong jaw and their mother's gentle eyes. He embraced Amara tightly, lifting her off the ground like she weighed nothing. "My sister, welcome, welcome, you are home now." Belinda stood at the front door, watching. She was a beautiful woman, there was no denying it. Light-skinned with carefully straightened hair that fell to her shoulders, she dressed in expensive wrappers and kept her nails painted red. She smiled as Amara approached, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome, my sister," Belinda said, the words correct but the tone flat. "Chike has told me so much about you." Amara bowed respectfully, as a younger woman should. "Thank you, Sister Belinda. I am grateful for your kindness. I won't be a burden, I promise. I will help with everything in the house." Belinda's smile tightened. "We shall see." That first week passed peacefully enough. Chike went to work each morning, and Amara threw herself into making herself useful. She woke early to sweep the compound, prepared breakfast before anyone asked, washed clothes by hand even though there was a washing machine, and cooked dinner with care. Jollof rice, egusi soup, pounded yam, all the meals her mother had taught her. Chike praised her openly. "Belinda, you see, my sister is a blessing. This food tastes like Mama's cooking. I have missed this taste." Belinda said nothing. She ate in silence, her jaw working mechanically. The neighbors noticed Amara quickly. In a village like Humans, everyone notices everything. The women at the borehole commented on how respectful she was, how she greeted everyone properly, how she helped Mama Nneka carry her water bucket when the older woman's knee pained her. "Chike's sister is a good girl," they said. "Well-trained, not like these modern girls who don't know how to greet their elders." "And beautiful too," Mama Nneka added. "Not the fake beauty of creams and makeup. Natural beauty, the kind that comes from a clean heart." These words, meant as compliments, traveled like seeds on the wind. They reached Belinda's ears through her friend Adiz, who repeated them innocently over afternoon tea. Everyone is talking about Amara O. They say she's so humble, so hardworking. Your husband must be so proud to have such a sister. Belinda's teacup froze halfway to her lips. Is that so? From that day, something shifted in the house. It started small. Belinda would ask Amara to redo chores that were already done. This floor is not clean enough, sweep it again. The beans are undercooked, make fresh ones. Why did you use so much soap on the clothes? Are you trying to waste my resources? Amara apologized each time, redoing the work without complaint. She told herself that Belinda was the madam of the house, that it was right to obey, that perhaps she truly wasn't doing things well enough. But the criticism grew sharper. You think you're special because my husband praises your cooking. Let me tell you something, this is MY house. I am the wife here, not you. I know, Sister Belinda, I never meant. Shut up when I'm talking. You come here with nothing, eating my food, using my water, and you want to be forming humble. I see you. I see what you're doing. Amara didn't understand. She wasn't doing anything except trying to help, trying to earn her keep, trying not to be a burden. But Belinda's anger was not rational. It was the anger of a woman who felt her position threatened, who heard her husband's praise of another woman and felt it like a slap, who saw neighbors smile at Amara and felt invisible. Chike noticed nothing. When he came home, Belinda was all smiles and sweetness. She served his food with both hands, laughed at his jokes, sat beside him while he watched television. The moment he left for work, the mask fell. One evening, Chike commented casually, I saw Brother Emeka today. He asked if Amara was single. He's looking for a wife and he's a good man. He has his own business. Belinda's hand clenched around her fork. And what did you say? I said I would ask Amara, of course. It would be good for her to settle down. Don't you think so, my wife? Belinda's smile was poison wrapped in sugar. Yes, very good. That night after Chike fell asleep, Belinda sat in the darkness of their bedroom, staring at the wall. Her mind churned with thoughts that grew darker and darker. Thoughts of how everyone praised Amara, how Chike smiled at his sister, how the neighbors talked about her beauty, her kindness, her goodness. And beneath it all, the terrible question that had been growing in Belinda's heart like a poisonous plant. What if he wishes he had married someone like her instead of me? Jealousy is a strange sickness. It doesn't announce itself with fever or rash. It creeps in slowly, disguising itself as concern, as protection, as righteous anger. By the time you realize it has infected you, it has already spread to your heart. Belinda watched Amara sleep on the mat in the living room, her face peaceful in the moonlight streaming through the window. And in that moment, Belinda made a decision. She didn't name it, didn't speak it aloud, but it settled in her bones like a promise. This girl will learn her place, one way or another. The next morning, Amara woke early as usual and began her chores. She didn't notice the way Belinda watched her from the bedroom doorway, arms crossed, eyes calculating. She didn't notice the way Belinda's fingers drummed against her arm, keeping rhythm with some dark song only she could hear. She didn't notice the danger that had crept into the house like smoke under a door. But she would soon. 3 weeks later, on an afternoon when Chike was away at work and the sun beat down on the zinc roof like a war drum, Belinda called out in a voice that dripped with false sweetness. Amara, come here. I need you to iron something for me. Amara hurried to the bedroom, eager to help, eager to please, eager to prove she was not the threat Belinda seemed to think she was. She didn't know that some fires, once lit, cannot be extinguished with good intentions. She didn't know that jealousy, left to fester, becomes a living thing that demands feeding. She didn't know that in a few minutes. Her life would change forever. Belinda plugged in the iron, her movements slow and deliberate. She tested the heat with a wet finger. It sizzled. Hot enough. She looked at Amara with eyes that held no mercy, no humanity, only the cold calculation of someone who had convinced themselves that cruelty was justified. Come closer, Belinda said. I want to show you something. And in the corner of the room, in the shadows where sunlight couldn't reach, something ancient stirred, something that had witnessed human wickedness for generations, that knew what was about to happen, that would record this moment in the invisible book where all injustices are written. The iron glowed red-hot in Belinda's hand. Can jealousy live peacefully inside a home? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to TJ Stories. Hit that notification bell, because Happen Next will leave you speechless. Trust me, you're not ready for what Belinda does next. Previously on TJ Stories, Amara came to live with her brother Chike and his wife Belinda. What seemed like a blessing became a nightmare as Belinda's jealousy grew darker each day. Now, something terrible is about to happen. The thing about evil is that it doesn't usually announce itself with thunder and lightning. It starts quietly in the small moments, a harsh word here, a cold look there, a punishment that seems almost reasonable until you step back and see the pattern. By the time the victim realizes what's happening, the trap has already closed. Amara had 3 weeks left of innocence. 3 weeks of believing that if she just worked harder, was kinder, spoke softer, Belinda would warm to her. 3 weeks of making excuses for her sister-in-law's coldness, of telling herself that Belinda was probably stressed, probably tired, probably dealing with her own problems that had nothing to do with Amara. Young women are taught to doubt themselves first, to assume they are the problem, to apologize for taking up space. This is how predators thrive. The iron sat on the ironing board, its metal face glowing with heat. Belinda had called Amara to iron Chike's work clothes, a reasonable request, the kind of household task that happens in homes across Africa every day. But there was something in Belinda's voice that made Amara's stomach tighten with unnamed dread. "Yes, Sister Belinda," Amara said, entering the bedroom with her head slightly bowed in respect. "I'll iron them now." Belinda stood by the window, arms crossed, watching Amara with the intensity of a hawk watching a mouse. "You think you're very useful, don't you?" Amara's hands paused over the shirt she was smoothing on the board. I just want to help, sister, that's all." "Help," Belinda laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what you call it? Cooking meals that make my husband forget mine, cleaning so thoroughly that neighbors comment on how the house never looked this good before, smiling at every man who passes by, making them wonder why Chike's sister is still single." "Sister Belinda, I would never." "I said shut you, P." The shout was so sudden, so violent, that Amara flinched. Belinda crossed the room in 3 strides, standing so close that Amara could smell the hair cream and anger radiating from her. "You come into my house with your innocent face and your humble act, and you think I don't see what you're doing. You think I'm stupid." "Please, sister, I don't understand. What have I done wrong?" Belinda's eyes were wild now, all pretense of control gone. "What have you done? What have you done? You exist. That's what you've done. You exist in my space, breathing my air, stealing my husband's attention, making me look bad in my own home." Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was beyond the usual coldness, beyond the daily criticisms. This was something else entirely, something dangerous. "Sister Belinda, please, I'll leave if you want me to. I'll talk to Brother Chike, I'll find somewhere else." "Oh, now you want to run to Chike. You want to make me the bad wife who sent his beloved sister away. You want to turn him against me." "No, I promise I would never." But Belinda was beyond listening. In her mind, Amara was the enemy, the threat, the reason for every insecurity that had been festering in her heart since her wedding day. The reason Chike sometimes seemed distant. The reason the neighbors' compliments felt like insults. The reason she woke up at night with a feeling of dread she couldn't name. Jealousy has a logic of its own, and in that logic, Amara was guilty of the crime of being good. "Iron those clothes," Belinda said finally, her voice dropping to something low and dangerous. "And don't let me find any wrinkles or you'll regret it." She left the room, but Amara could feel her presence just outside the door, waiting, watching, listening. Amara's hands shook as she picked up the iron. The metal was hot, too hot probably, but she was too rattled to adjust the temperature. She focused on the task, trying to calm her racing heart, trying to make sense of what had just happened. She didn't understand that this was a test, that Belinda was building toward something, that every humiliation, every confrontation was a brick in a wall that would eventually trap her completely. The days that followed were worse. Belinda found fault with everything. The rice was too soft, the soup was too salty, the floor wasn't clean enough, the clothes weren't folded properly. On, an endless stream of criticism that wore Amara down like water on stone. But worse than the words was the atmosphere. The house felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Chaik noticed nothing. He left early for work and came home late, tired and distracted by his own concerns. When he was present, Belinda transformed, becoming the perfect wife, all smiles and sweet words. "Your sister is very helpful," she would say, squeezing Chaik's shoulder. "She's learning so much about how to run a home properly." Chaik would beam. That's good. Amara, you're lucky to learn from Belinda. She's an excellent homemaker." Amara would nod, her throat too tight to speak, her eyes meeting Belinda's across the room and seeing the warning there. Say nothing, or it will get worse. The neighbors began to notice something was wrong. Mama Nneka, the elder woman who lived next door, saw Amara one morning when she came out to sweep. The girl's eyes were red, her movements mechanical. "Amara, my daughter, are you well?" Mama Nneka asked, concern creasing her weathered face. Amara forced a smile. "Yes, Mama, just tired." "Tired, but you're young. When I was your age, I could work from sunrise to sunset and still dance at night." She peered closer. "Is everything well in the house, with your brother and his wife?" "Everything is fine, Mama. Sister Belinda is. She's teaching me many things." Mama Nneka's eyes narrowed. She had lived long enough to recognize the careful words of a woman in distress. But what could she do? It was not her place to interfere in another family's business, especially without proof of wrongdoing. "If you need anything," she said quietly, "my door is always open." Amara nodded, grateful but silent. What could she say? That her sister-in-law was cruel, that she was criticized from morning to night, that she felt like a prisoner in her brother's house. These were soft injuries, the kind that left no visible marks. Who would believe her over Belinda, the respected wife of a civil servant? That night, Amara lay on her mat in the living room and prayed. She prayed for patience, for strength, for wisdom. She prayed for things to get better. She prayed for her mother's spirit to guide her. She did not pray for protection. She should have. In the bedroom, Belinda lay awake beside her sleeping husband, her mind churning with dark thoughts. The anger had become a constant companion now, a voice in her head that never stopped whispering. "She's taking everything from you. She's making you look bad. Soon Chaik will see that you're not good enough. Soon he'll wish he married someone else, someone like her." The voice was not rational, but Belinda had stopped caring about rationality. All she cared about was the burning feeling in her chest, the need to assert control, the desperate urge to remind Amara and herself who was the wife in this house. The next evening, Chaik came home with news. "There's a regional meeting next week," he announced cheerfully. "I have to travel to Enugu for 3 days. Big opportunity for promotion if I make a good impression." Belinda's heart leapt, though she kept her face neutral. 3 days. "Yes, oh, don't worry, I'll leave money for food. Amara can help you with everything." He turned to his sister, who was setting the table. "Amara, take good care of my wife while I'm gone, okay? Make sure she doesn't stress herself." "Yes, brother," Amara said quietly. After dinner, after Chaik went to bed, Belinda stood in the kitchen doorway watching Amara wash the dishes. Her mind was working, planning, calculating. 3 days. 3 days alone with this girl who had invaded her home, her marriage, her peace of mind. 3 days to teach a lesson that would never be forgotten. "Amara," she called out, her voice deceptively calm. "Yes, Sister Belinda." "From tomorrow, things are going to change in this house. I've been too soft with you, too accommodating. But while Chaik is away, you're going to learn what real work means, what real discipline means. Do you understand?" Amara's hands stilled in the soapy water. Every instinct screamed danger, but what could she do? Where could she go? "Yes, Sister Belinda," she whispered. "Good," Belinda smiled, and it was the smile of a person who had made a decision that could not be unmade. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a very long day." She turned and walked to her bedroom, leaving Amara standing in the kitchen with water dripping from her hands and fear dripping into her heart. Outside, the night insects sang their endless song. Inside Mama Nneka's compound next door, the old woman paused in her evening prayers, struck by a sudden feeling of unease. She looked toward Chike's house, seeing the lights still on, sensing something wrong in a way that had nothing to do with sight or sound. "Protect that child," she prayed aloud, though she couldn't have said why. "Whatever is coming, protect that child." But some prayers arrive too late, or are answered in ways we don't expect. In the bedroom, Belinda lay down beside her husband and closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Her hands clenched and unclenched in the darkness, fingers curling as if gripping something only she could see. The iron sat in the storage room, unplugged, waiting. In 2 weeks, it would serve a purpose far beyond straightening wrinkles from cloth. In 2 weeks, it would become the instrument of an act so cruel that the whole village would speak of it in horrified whispers for years to come. In 2 weeks, Belinda would cross a line that could never be uncrossed. But tonight, she merely plotted. Tonight, she nursed her grievances like precious children, feeding them with imagined slights and perceived threats, until they grew large enough to justify anything. Anything at all. Previously, Belinda's jealousy has reached a breaking point. With Chike away on a work trip, she finally has Amara alone. What started as cold words is about to become something far worse. There are moments in every story where the path splits. A moment where one choice leads to redemption and another to damnation. A moment where a person can step back from the edge or leap forward into darkness. The moment is often quiet, unremarkable, ordinary, until suddenly it isn't. For Belinda, that moment came on a Wednesday afternoon when the sun hung heavy in the sky, and Chike was 200 kilometers away in Enugu. The house was silent except for the sound of water running in the bathroom where Amara was bathing. Belinda sat in the living room, a basket of clothes beside her, an iron plugged into the wall socket. She had been sitting there for 15 minutes, not moving, not ironing, just staring at the glowing metal surface as if it held the answers to questions she was afraid to ask. "How did I get here?" A small voice whispered in the back of her mind. "How did I become this person?" But the voice was drowned out by the louder one, the one that had been growing stronger every day. She deserves it. She brought this on herself. She needs to learn. When Amara emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping water onto her shoulders, she found Belinda in the living room with the iron and the clothes. "Sister Belinda, you're ironing. I can do that." "Sit down," Belinda said, her voice flat. Amara hesitated, confused by the tone but conditioned now to obey. She sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching her towel, water pooling on the floor beneath her. Belinda set down the iron and turned to face her. "We need to talk." "Yes, sister." "Do you know what your problem is, Amara?" Belinda's voice was eerily calm, the kind of calm that comes before an explosion. "Your problem is that you think humility will protect you. You think if you just keep your head down and do your work, everything will be fine. But you're wrong." "Sister Belinda, I don't understand." "Of course you don't understand. That's because you're stupid. Too stupid to see what you're doing, too stupid to know your place." Belinda stood, packing now, her voice rising. "You walk around here like you own the place, like you're the wife and I'm the guest. You cook better than me, clean better than me, make everyone love you more than me." "That's not true. I never meant." "Shut up." Belinda's scream was sharp enough to crack glass. "I'm tired of your excuses, tired of your innocent act, tired of you." She grabbed the iron before Amara understood what was happening. Time has a strange quality in moments of violence. It can slow down or speed up, stretch out or compress, depending on whether you're the victim or the perpetrator. For Amara, the next few seconds felt like they happened underwater, slow, impossible, unreal. She saw Belinda's hand close around the iron handle. She saw the determination in her sister-in-law's eyes. She saw the iron moving toward her arm, her bare, wet arm, and her mind couldn't process it because people don't do this to each other. Sisters don't hurt sisters. This can't be happening. This can't be real. The pain was like nothing she had ever experienced. The scream that tore from Amara's throat was primal, animal, the sound of a creature in mortal agony. It was the scream that neighbors heard 3 compounds away, the scream that made people drop what they were doing and run, the scream that would echo in the village's collective memory for years. Belinda held the iron against Amara's forearm for 3 seconds. 3 seconds. It doesn't sound like much, does it? 3 seconds is the time it takes to exhale a breath, to snap your fingers, to blink twice. But 3 seconds with a hot iron pressed against bare flesh is an eternity of hell. The skin bubbled and blistered immediately, turning from brown to angry red to sick white at the edges. The smell of burning flesh filled the room, sweet and nauseating, unmistakable. Amara tried to pull away, but Belinda gripped her other arm, holding her in place with a strength born of rage and madness. "Now you'll remember," Belinda hissed, her face inches from Amara's. "Now you'll remember who is the wife in this house." When she finally released her, Amara collapsed on the floor, cradling her arm, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. The pain was everywhere, radiating from her arm through her entire body, white-hot and relentless. Belinda stood over her, breathing hard, the iron still in her hand. For a moment, she looked down at what she had done, and something like horror flickered across her face. But it died quickly, replaced by cold satisfaction. "Get up," she said. "Get up and go put water on that. And if you tell anyone, what happened, I will say you did it to yourself by accident. Who do you think Chike will believe? His wife or his charity case sister?" But it was already too late for threats. The scream had brought the neighbors running. Mama Nneka reached the door first, her old legs carrying her faster than they had moved in years. She pounded on the locked door. "Open this door. Open it now." Behind her came Papa Akafer, the compound elder. Then Auntie Kai from 2 houses down. Then more and more people, drawn by the sound of suffering, by the instinct that tells us when something terrible has happened. Inside, Belinda realized her mistake. In her rage, she had forgotten that walls have ears, that screams carry, that cruelty witnessed becomes cruelty punished. "Don't open the door," she commanded Amara, her voice panicked now. "Don't you dare open that door." But Amara was beyond commands. She crawled to the door, her good hand fumbling with the lock, her injured arm sending waves of agony through her body with every movement. She managed to turn the lock just as Papa Akafer and 2 other men threw their shoulders against the door. They burst in to find Amara on the floor, her arm a mess of burned flesh and forming blisters, tears streaming down her face. Belinda stood frozen in the middle of the room, the iron still in her hand, guilt and defiance warring on her face. The silence that followed was more terrible than any scream. Mama Nneka pushed past the men and dropped to her knees beside Amara. When she saw the burn, her hand flew to her mouth. "Jesus Christ of Nazareth, what kind of wickedness is this?" "It was an accident," Belinda said quickly, her mind racing. "She was ironing and the towel slipped and—" "Liar," Mama Nneka's voice cracked like a whip. "You think we are fools. You think we don't know what an iron burn looks like. This is not an accident, this is deliberate. This is evil." Papa Akafer took the iron from Belinda's unresisting hand and unplugged it. His face was grim. "Madam Belinda, what have you done?" "She's lying. Whatever she told you, she's lying. I didn't." "We heard the scream," Auntie Kai said coldly. "We all heard it, and we've been hearing things for weeks now, doors slamming, voices raised, this girl looking more and more afraid. We saw it, but we said it was not our business. We stayed silent, and now look what our silence has allowed." More neighbors crowded in the doorway, their faces shocked and angry. In a village like Human's, news travels faster than lightning. Within minutes, everyone would know. Within an hour, the story would have reached every compound, every market stall, every church pew. Belinda had made herself infamous. "Someone call Chike," Papa Akefer commanded. "Call him now, he needs to come home immediately, and someone else call the police." "The police?" Belinda's voice rose to a shriek. "For what? This is a family matter, you people have no right." "No right?" Mama Nneka stood, her elderly frame somehow imposing in her anger. "We have no right to stop wickedness when we see it. We have no right to protect a child being tortured in her own brother's house. Woman, you have lost your senses." Auntie Kai Kai had already wrapped Amara's arm in a clean cloth and was helping her to her feet. "We're taking her to the clinic. Papa Akefer, you stay here and make sure this woman doesn't run away." "I'm not running anywhere," Belinda shouted, but her voice cracked with fear now. The reality of what she had done was beginning to sink in. "This is my house, you can't just—" "Your house," Papa Akefer's voice was thunder. "This house belongs to Chike, and right now, I don't think you have any business being in it. Sit down, Madam Belinda. Sit down and wait for your husband, and pray that Amadioha doesn't strike you dead before he arrives." As they carried Amara out, she looked back at Belinda. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and in that moment, Belinda saw something that chilled her more than any threat of police or punishment. She saw pity. Even after everything, even through the pain and fear and betrayal, Amara looked at her with pity. As if Belinda was the one to be sorry for. As if the real tragedy was not what had been done to Amara's body, but what had happened to Belinda's soul. The door closed. Belinda sank onto the sofa, surrounded by hostile neighbors, the iron cooling on the floor beside her, the smell of burned flesh still hanging in the air like an accusation. And in the sudden quiet, she heard her own thoughts for the first time in weeks, clear and unbearable. "What have I done? Oh God, what have I done?" But some questions come too late to matter. Some lines, once crossed, leave no path back. She had wanted to teach Amara a lesson, to put her in her place, to prove who held power in this house. And she had taught a lesson indeed. Just not the one she intended. At the clinic, the nurse took one look at Amara's arm and her face went pale. "Who did this to you?" she demanded. Amara opened her mouth to lie, to protect, to hide. Because that's what girls are taught to do, to keep family secrets, to not shame the family name. But Mama Nneka answered before she could speak. Her brother's wife. She held a hot iron to this child's skin deliberately. We saw the evidence, we heard the scream. This is not an accident. This is attempted murder. The word hung in the air like smoke. Murder. Belinda had not thought of it that way. She had thought of it as discipline, as teaching a lesson, as defending her territory. But the law has different words for pressing hot metal against human flesh. The law calls it assault, attempted murder, grievous bodily harm. The law does not care about jealousy or insecurity or hurt feelings. The law only cares about the wound. And the wound was terrible. In Enugu, 200 kilometers away, Chike's phone rang during a meeting. He saw it was his neighbor Papa Akefer and stepped out to answer, irritated at the interruption. "Hello, Papa, is everything?" "Chike, you need to come home. Now it's urgent." "What? Papa, I'm in the middle of an important—" "Your sister is in the clinic. Your wife burned her with an iron. Come home now." The phone nearly slipped from Chike's hand. Back in Humans, Belinda sat alone in her living room, surrounded by the silence of condemnation. Through the window, she could see neighbors gathering in clusters, pointing at her house, shaking their heads. Some of the women spat on the ground as they passed, a gesture of disgust, of rejection. She had become what every village fears most, the wicked woman who harms the innocent. And as the sun began to set, painting the sky the color of blood and fire, Belinda finally understood what she had truly destroyed. Not just Amara's skin, but her own future. Because there are some acts so terrible that forgiveness becomes impossible, and some wounds that run deeper than flesh. The iron sat on the floor where Papa Akefer had left it, innocent-looking now, just a household tool. But Belinda would never be able to look at an iron again without seeing what she had become. A monster wearing a wife's face. Previously, Belinda crossed the unforgivable line, burning Amara with a hot iron. The neighbors witnessed the aftermath, and now Chike is racing home from Enugu. The truth can no longer be hidden. There is a Igbo proverb that says, Eziokwu bu ndu, truth is life. But our elders also taught us that truth is like a palm fruit. It must be carefully handled, or it will stain everything it touches. And on this night, as Chike's bus sped through the darkness toward Humans, truth was about to stain his entire world red. He arrived at midnight, his body exhausted from the emergency journey, but his mind racing with terrible possibilities. Papa Akafer's words had been brief on the phone, but they were enough to paint a picture Chike couldn't accept. Your wife burned your sister with an iron. Impossible. Belinda could be moody, yes. She could be sharp-tongued sometimes. But violent, cruel, his Belinda who sang in the church choir and brought food to sick neighbors. No, there had to be a mistake, an accident, a misunderstanding. The house was dark when he arrived, but he could see lights in Mama Nneka's compound next door. He went there first, his footsteps heavy with dread. Mama Nneka opened the door before he could knock. Her face told him everything he didn't want to know. "Where is she?" Chike asked, his voice hoarse. "Where is Amara?" "Inside, sleeping by God's grace. But Chike," the old woman's eyes filled with tears. "My son, what I saw today. I have lived 73 years and I have never seen such wickedness. Tell me it was an accident. Please, Mama, tell me." "I cannot tell you lies, Chike. I wish I could. Come, see for yourself." She led him to the small bedroom where Amara lay on a mat, her arm bandaged heavily, her face pale even in sleep. The nurse from the clinic, a young woman named Blessing, sat beside her, keeping watch. "We gave her strong painkillers," Blessing whispered. "The burn is severe, 2nd degree covering a large area. It will scar." She paused, her professional composure cracking. "Mr. Chike, I have treated many burns in my career. Kitchen accidents, kerosene stove explosions, children playing with fire. I know what they look like." Her eyes met his. "This was no accident. Someone held that iron against her skin deliberately. The shape is too perfect, too deep. This was punishment." Chike's legs gave out. He sank to the floor beside his sister's mat, his hands shaking as he reached for her good hand. "Amara," he whispered. "Amara, forgive me." She stirred in her sleep, whimpering, and even unconscious. Her body flinched away from his touch as if expecting more pain. That flinch broke something in Chike's chest. "Where is my wife?" he asked, his voice strange and cold. "Still in your house," Mama Nneka said. "Papa Akafer and some of the men are watching to make sure she doesn't run. We wanted to call the police immediately, but we decided to wait for you. This is your family matter to handle first." Chike stood, and those who knew him would not have recognized the expression on his face. Gone was the gentle, trusting brother. In his place stood a man who had just discovered that he had brought a viper into his home and left his sister alone with it. "I need to see my wife," he said quietly. "Alone." "Chike," Mama Nneka began, concerned. "Alone, Mama, please." They watched him go, this man who had always smiled easily, who had always seen the best in people, who had trusted without question. They watched him walk toward his house with the gait of someone going to bury a loved one. Because in a way, that's exactly what he was doing. Belinda had been sitting in the same spot for 8 hours. She had not eaten, had not drunk water, had not moved except to use the bathroom, and then only because Papa Akafer had briefly stepped outside to give her privacy. The other men, 3 of them, sat in her living room like sentries, their faces carved from stone. No one spoke to her. She was alone with her thoughts, and her thoughts were a hell far worse than anything the village could inflict. She kept seeing Amara's face, kept hearing the scream, kept smelling the burning flesh. Her hands trembled constantly, as if the iron was still in them, still glowing hot, still carrying the weight of what she had done. What have I become? The question circled endlessly in her mind. What kind of woman burns another person? What kind of monster did I turn into? But beneath the horror and guilt, there was still a small, vicious part of her that whispered, "She deserved it. She was taking everything from you. You had to do something." That voice terrified her more than anything else, because she recognized it now for what it was. Not truth, not justified anger, but sickness. A sickness of the soul that had been growing for months, fed by insecurity and fear and jealousy, until it consumed everything good in her. When the door opened and Chaik walked in, Belinda's first impulse was relief. Her husband was home. He would understand. He would protect her. He would. But the look on his face killed that hope instantly. "Everyone out," Chaik said to the men. "Give us 10 minutes. Papa Akafer hesitated. "Chaik, are you sure?" 10 minutes, please." The men left, though they stood just outside the door, ready to intervene if needed. Husband and wife faced each other across the living room that had once been a home and was now a crime scene. "Tell me it's not true," Chaik said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me you didn't do what they say you did." Belinda opened her mouth, and a lie sat right there on her tongue, ready to be spoken. The lie she had rehearsed for 8 hours. It was an accident. She grabbed the iron from me. She slipped and fell on it. I tried to help her, but she pushed me away. I don't know why she's lying, but when she looked into Chaik's eyes, she knew the lie wouldn't save her. He already knew the truth. He just needed to hear it from her lips. "I did it," she heard herself say, and her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "I burned her." The silence that followed was absolute. Chaik stood frozen, his face draining of color. For a moment, Belinda thought he might faint. Then his expression hardened into something she had never seen before, cold, final, unforgiving. "Why?" The word came out broken. She was. Belinda struggled to find words that would make sense, that would explain the inexplicable. "She was taking over everything. The neighbors loved her more than me. You praised her cooking more than mine. Everyone talked about how wonderful she was, and I disappeared. In my own house, I became invisible." "So you burned her." Chaik's voice was flat. "Because people complimented her cooking, because neighbors smiled at her, because I appreciated my sister's help. You took a hot iron and pressed it into her flesh." Laid out like that, in his cold, clear words, it sounded insane. It sounded evil. Because it was. "I didn't plan it," Belinda whispered. I was so angry, and the iron was there, and You held it there for 3 seconds. Chaik's voice cracked. "The nurse said the depth of the burn means you held it there for at least 3 seconds. Do you know how long 3 seconds is when you're being tortured? When someone you trusted, someone you lived with, someone who was supposed to be your family is causing you unimaginable pain." Belinda's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but they felt meaningless now, too little and too late. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "Chaik, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. I wasn't thinking." "You weren't thinking." Chaik laughed, and it was the most terrible sound. "For weeks, you tormented my sister. For weeks, you made her life hell while I was at work, while I trusted you to treat her with kindness. And today, you burned her like an animal because you felt jealous. And now you say you weren't thinking." "Please, Chaik, please." "I loved you," he said, and the past tense hung in the air like a death sentence. "I chose you above all others. I brought you into my family. I trusted you with my home, my future, my sister, and you repaid that trust with cruelty I cannot even comprehend." Belinda reached for him, but he stepped back as if her touch would contaminate him. "Don't," he said coldly. "Don't touch me, you disgust me." The words hit Belinda like physical blows. She had destroyed many things today: Amara's skin, the neighbor's respect, her own conscience. But this was the moment she truly understood what she had lost. Her marriage was over. Not because of divorce papers or legal separation, but because something essential had died in Chaik's eyes when he looked at her. The love was gone. The trust was ashes, and nothing she could say or do would bring them back. "The elders will convene tomorrow," Chaik said, his voice mechanical now, devoid of emotion. "They will decide what happens next, but regardless of what they say, you need to understand something, Belinda." He leaned closer, and she could see the pain beneath his anger, the betrayal that would scar him as surely as the iron had scarred Amara. "You will never touch my sister again. You will never speak to her again. And when this is over, Whether the police take you or the elders punish you, you will leave my house and you will never come back. Chike, no, please, this is my home. Your home? His voice rose for the first time. You destroyed this home. You burned it down just as surely as if you'd set it on fire. This house will never be a home again because every time I walk through that door, I will remember what you did here. His chest heaved with emotion. Then, more quietly, pack your things. You'll sleep at your parents' house tonight. The elders will send for you tomorrow. My parents, Chike, I can't tell them what I did. They'll what? Disown you, be ashamed of you. Chike's smile was bitter. Good, they should be, I am. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. You asked me once why we didn't have children yet, he said without looking back. I told you it was God's timing, but right now, at this moment, I thank God we don't have children, because if we did, they would have had a monster for a mother, and I would have had to watch you raise them, never knowing if your jealousy or your rage might turn on them one day too. He walked out, leaving Belinda alone with those final words echoing in her ears. Monster. The door closed, and in the sudden quiet, Belinda heard something that would haunt her forever. The sound of her own breathing, the breath of a woman who had destroyed everything she ever claimed to love in service of an emotion she couldn't even name properly. She had called it love, she had called it protection, she had called it defending her place. But the truth was simpler and uglier. She had called it jealousy, and jealousy had answered. And now she would pay the price. At Mama Nneka's house, Chike sat beside his sister's sleeping form, tears finally falling freely. He held her good hand gently, as if she was made of glass, and whispered apologies she couldn't hear. I should have seen it, he said to the darkness. I should have protected you. I brought you into that house and I let her hurt you. Forgive me, Amara, please forgive me. Mama Nneka stood in the doorway, her heart aching for this man, who had just learned that love could live in the same house as evil and never know it. She will heal, the old woman said softly. The body heals even from terrible wounds, but Chike, she paused, choosing her words carefully. You must heal too, this is not your fault. I married her, Mama. I brought her into my family. How is it not my fault? Because evil hides itself well, because jealousy wears a smile until the moment it strikes. Because we cannot see into hearts, we can only trust and hope we have chosen well. Mama Nneka sighed. Sometimes we choose wrong, but the sin belongs to the sinner, not to those who loved them in good faith. But Chike wasn't sure he believed her. He would carry this guilt for years, the guilt of the blind man who let a viper into his home, because it promised to keep him warm. As dawn broke over humans, painting the sky with colors too beautiful for such an ugly day, 3 things were certain. First, the elders would convene and justice would be demanded. Second, Belinda's name would become a warning whispered to young brides across the region. And third, some wounds never truly heal, they just teach us where the danger lives. The iron sat in the corner of the police evidence room now, tagged and bagged, silent witness to the moment a marriage died, and a woman's soul was revealed to be made of something dark and bitter. Tomorrow, the whole village would gather. Tomorrow, judgment would come. But tonight, in the quiet hours before dawn, 3 people lay awake with their separate agonies. Amara with her physical pain, Chike with his shattered trust, and Belinda with the terrible knowledge that she had become exactly the kind of person she had always feared. The kind who destroys beauty, because she cannot bear its light. Is regret real when punishment, arrives? The elders are coming, the truth is out, but will justice satisfy the wound? Subscribe to TJ Stories, this is where the ancestors speak. Previously, Chike discovered the horrifying truth and confronted Belinda. Now, as dawn breaks over humans, the elders prepare to convene. In African tradition, some matters cannot be left to courts alone. They must be judged by those who understand that justice is more than punishment. The morning sun rose reluctantly, as if even the sky knew it would illuminate shameful things. By 7 o'clock, the news had spread to every corner of humans and beyond. In the market, traders stopped their haggling to discuss it. At the boreholes, women abandoned their gossip about who was pregnant or who had quarreled with her mother-in-law to speak in hushed, horrified tones about what Belinda had done. In the church compound, even Pastor Emeka, who normally preached forgiveness above all, shook his head and said some sins require earthly consequences before heavenly mercy can even be discussed. The gathering was called for 2:00 in the afternoon at the compound of Chief Okonkwo, the eldest man in the village. Chief Okonkwo was 91 years old, nearly blind, but his mind was sharp as broken glass and his moral authority absolute. When he summoned you to face the elders, you came. No matter who you were, no matter what you had done. Belinda arrived with her parents. Her mother wept openly, a wrapper tied around her waist in mourning fashion, as if her daughter had already died. Her father walked with his head down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. They had not slept. When Belinda had appeared at their door the previous night and confessed what she had done, her father had slapped her, the first time he had struck her since she was a child. "You have destroyed our family name," he had said, his voice shaking with rage and sorrow. "Everything we built, everything we taught you, you have thrown it all away. For what? For jealousy, for madness." Now they sat on the bench reserved for the accused, 3 people bound by blood and shame. Across from them sat Chike, Amara, and Mama Nneka. Amara's arm was still heavily bandaged. She wore a long-sleeved dress despite the heat, trying to cover the injury, but everyone knew it was there. Everyone had heard about it. Some had even seen the pictures that the clinic nurse had taken for evidence, pictures that made grown men turn away in disgust. The compound filled quickly. This was not just a family matter anymore. This was a village matter, a moral matter. The kind of case that would be remembered and referenced for generations. Chief Okonkwo emerged from his house leaning on a walking stick, supported by his grandson. Despite his age and near blindness, his presence commanded instant silence. He settled into his chair, a throne of carved wood that had heard confessions of adultery, theft, land disputes, and countless other human failures over decades. Beside him sat 6 other elders, 3 men and 3 women, representing the balance that true justice requires. Among them was Mama Nkuru, who was known throughout the region as a woman who could see into hearts. If you lied before Mama Nkuru, everyone said, your own tongue would betray you. "We are here," Chief Okonkwo began, his voice surprisingly strong for his age, "because something has happened in our village that offends every law, the law of man, the law of God, and the law of our ancestors. We are here because a woman who should have been a protector became a tormentor. We are here because blood was shed in a place that should have been safe." He paused, letting the words settle over the gathering like a heavy blanket. "Belinda, daughter of Oak, stand and face this council." Belinda stood on shaking legs. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her wrapper wrinkled from a sleepless night. She looked small suddenly, diminished, nothing like the confident woman who had walked into Chike's house 2 years ago as a bride. "Do you deny the accusation brought against you?" Chief Okonkwo asked. "Do you deny that you deliberately burned your husband's sister with a hot iron?" Silence. Every eye in the compound fixed on Belinda, waiting. She could lie. She could claim it was an accident, that Amara had grabbed the iron, that it all happened so fast. She could weave a story that might create enough doubt to save her from the worst consequences. But when she opened her mouth, only the truth came out. "No, Chief, I do not deny it. I did what they say I did." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Even those who had known the truth from eyewitness accounts were shocked by the boldness of the confession. Belinda's mother collapsed against her husband, wailing, my daughter has gone mad." Chief Okonkwo raised his hand for silence. "Why?" he asked simply. "That is what we must understand. Why would a woman do such a thing? What evil entered your heart?" And here, Belinda made her second choice of the day. She could have blamed evil spirits. She could have claimed a curse or possession. In a village where people still believed in such things, it might have earned her some sympathy, some understanding. But she was done with lies. "Jealousy, Chief," she said, her voice barely audible. "I was jealous of her. She came to live in my house and everyone loved her. Everyone praised her. My husband praised her, and I felt like I was disappearing, like she was taking my place. So you burned her, Mama Enkuru said, her voice sharp as a blade. You burned her because people smiled at her, because your husband appreciated his sister's help, because neighbors said she was kind. Yes. Do you hear yourself? Mama Enkuru stood, her impressive frame towering over the seated Belinda. Do you hear the poverty of your reason? You tortured an innocent girl because you felt insecure, because you could not control your emotions, because you chose jealousy over humanity. Belinda crumbled under the words. I know it was wrong. I know I became something terrible. I don't know how to explain it, how to make anyone understand. That is because there is no explanation that satisfies, Chief Okonkwo said quietly. There is no understanding that makes this acceptable. You crossed a line that civilized people do not cross, Belinda. You became a torturer in your own home. He turned his milky eyes toward Amara. Child, stand and show us your wound. Amara hesitated, tears streaming down her face. She didn't want to expose her injury to this crowd, didn't want to be the victim on display. But Mama Nneka squeezed her good hand encouragingly, and slowly, Amara stood and began to unwrap the bandages. The gasps were louder this time. The burn was an angry red and white mess, shaped exactly like the base of an iron. Blisters had formed and broken. The skin was damaged so deeply that even with the best treatment, it would scar permanently. A mark she would carry for life. A mark of her sister-in-law's hatred. Several women in the crowd began to cry. One man stood and walked away, unable to bear the sight. Chief Okonkwo's face remained impassive, but those close to him saw his jaw tighten. Cover yourself, child. We have seen enough. As Amara rewrapped the bandages with shaking hands, Chief Okonkwo spoke again. In my 91 years, I have seen much wickedness. I have seen men kill over land. I have seen women poison co-wives. I have seen children betray parents and parents abandon children. But this, he paused, struggling for words. This is a special kind of evil. This is the evil that lives in the same house as its victim, that smiles and serves food and pretends to be family while planning cruelty. This is the evil that our ancestors warned us about when they said, the enemy that shares your roof is more dangerous than the one who sleeps in the forest. He turned to the other elders. Let us deliberate. The 6 elders rose and walked to the side of the compound, speaking in low tones. The crowd waited in tense silence. This was not a quick process. African justice takes time because it seeks not just punishment, but restoration of moral balance. After 30 minutes, they returned. Mama Enkuru spoke first, addressing Chaik. Chaik, son of our village, you have suffered a terrible betrayal. Your wife, whom you trusted, has violated every sacred duty. She has harmed your blood, damaged your family honor, and destroyed the peace of your home. What do you want from this council? Chaik stood. His voice was steady but filled with pain. I want justice for my sister. I want Belinda to face consequences for what she did, legal consequences, not just our traditional judgment, but more than that. He paused, looking at his wife, his soon-to-be former wife, with something like pity. I want her to get help, because the woman who did this is not the woman I married. Something is broken inside her, and it needs to be fixed before she destroys anyone else. It was a generous statement, more generous than many thought Belinda deserved. Chief Okonkwo nodded slowly. You speak with wisdom and mercy, but what about you, Amara? You are the one who bears the wound. What do you say? All eyes turned to Amara. She stood slowly, cradling her injured arm, her young face aged by pain and trauma. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. I don't understand why she hated me so much, she said. I tried to be respectful. I tried to help. I tried to stay out of her way, but nothing I did was ever enough. And now I will carry this scar forever, and every time I look at it, I will remember the day I learned that family can be more dangerous than strangers. She paused, wiping tears from her face. But I don't want revenge. I don't want to see her suffer the way she made me suffer. I just want her to stay away from me. Forever. And I want other women to hear this story and learn from it. Learn that jealousy, if you feed it, if you let it grow, will turn you into a monster. The elders nodded approvingly. Mama Enkuru smiled for the first time that day. You have your mother's wisdom, child. She would be proud of how you have handled this. Chief Okonkwo struck his walking stick against the ground 3 times, the signal that judgment was about to be pronounced. Belinda, daughter of Oak, this council finds you guilty of grievous assault against a member of your own family. You have violated every code of hospitality, every duty of sisterhood, every principle of our culture. You have brought shame not only to yourself, but to your family name, to your marriage, and to this village. He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. Therefore, we pronounce the following judgment. First, your marriage to Chaik is dissolved, effective immediately. You will return to your father's house. Chaik owes you nothing, no share of property, no support, nothing. You forfeited all marital rights when you committed this act. Second, you will compensate Amara for her medical treatment, both current and future, including any plastic surgery that might reduce the scarring. This is not negotiable. Third, you will publicly apologize to Amara, to Chaik, to your own family, and to this village for the shame you have brought upon us all. Fourth, we are referring this case to the police for criminal prosecution. Assault with a weapon, and that iron was a weapon, carries serious penalties under Nigerian law. You will face those consequences. And fifth, Chief Okonkwo's voice softened slightly. You will seek counseling. You will get professional help for whatever sickness of the mind caused you to do this thing. Because if you do not heal yourself, you will hurt others again. And next time, we may not be able to save you from yourself. Belinda collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Her parents came forward to lift her, their own faces wet with tears. The crowd began to disperse, speaking in low voices, some satisfied with the judgment, others thinking it too lenient, still others marveling at Amara's grace in the face of such cruelty. As people filed out, Chaik approached the elders and bowed deeply. Thank you for your wisdom. Chief Okonkwo placed a hand on his shoulder. Take care of your sister, Chaik. She will need time to heal, not just her body, but her trust. And you... The old man's voice dropped lower. Do not blame yourself too harshly. We cannot always see the darkness in people we love. That is not a failure of vision, it is evidence of a good heart. Do not let this experience harden you completely. As Chaik led Amara away, Belinda looked up from where she sat with her parents. Her eyes met Chaik's one last time across the compound. He looked away first. And in that moment, Belinda understood that some things, once broken, cannot be mended. Love was one of them. That evening, as the sun set on humans, word of the judgment spread through the surrounding villages. In homes across the region, mothers called their daughters and said, "Let me tell you about what happened in humans today. Let me tell you about the price of jealousy." And the story began to transform from a personal tragedy into a cautionary tale, the kind that gets passed down through generations. But for those who lived through it, it was still raw and painful, still a wound that would take years to even begin to heal. Belinda was taken to the police station that night. Her parents hired a lawyer, but the evidence was overwhelming. The photographs of the burn, the testimony of multiple witnesses, Belinda's own confession before the elders, it all pointed to one conclusion. She would face justice, both traditional and legal. And she would have to live with what she had done for the rest of her life. Previously, the elders pronounced judgment on Belinda, divorce, compensation, and criminal charges. But justice on paper is different from healing in the heart. Now we come to the end of this tale, where we discover what lessons remain when the fire has burned itself out. 6 months passed. In African storytelling, time heals some wounds and reveals the truth of others. The rapid passage of time in a tale reminds us that life moves forward whether we are ready or not, carrying both consequences and redemption in its current. Amara stood before a mirror in her new room, not in her brother's house, but in a small apartment she had rented with money from a job she had secured at a bank. The interview committee had been impressed by her quiet strength, her resilience, the way she carried herself despite obvious hardship. She examined her arm in the mirror. The scar was still there. It would always be there. but it had faded from angry red to a paler shade. The keloid had been treated by a plastic surgeon whose fees Belinda's family had paid as ordered by the elders. It would never disappear completely, but it was bearable now. More importantly, something else had changed. Amara no longer saw herself as a victim. She saw herself as a survivor. There is a difference, you see. A victim is defined by what was done to them. A survivor is defined by what they choose to do afterward. "Are you ready?" Mama Nneka called from the living room. The old woman had become like a grandmother to Amara, visiting often, bringing food, telling stories, helping her heal in ways that medicine could not reach. "Yes, Mama, I'm ready." Today was special. Today, Amara had been invited to speak at a women's conference in the nearby town. The organizers had heard her story. Stories always travel in Africa, especially stories that carry lessons, and they wanted her to share it with young women who needed to understand the signs of toxic relationships, the danger of normalized cruelty, the importance of speaking up before silence becomes complicit. At first, Amara had refused. The thought of standing before strangers and exposing her pain seemed unbearable, but Mama Nneka had convinced her. "Your wound can be a teacher," the old woman had said. "Your silence protects no one, but your voice might save someone from walking the path you walked." So Amara had agreed. As she arrived at the conference hall, she saw hundreds of women, young and old, educated and unschooled, some in expensive wrappers and others in faded dresses. All of them carrying their own stories, their own scars, visible and invisible. When she was introduced, the applause was warm but curious. They knew the basics of what had happened, but they wanted to hear it from her lips in her own words. Amara took the microphone, her hand shaking slightly. She looked out at the sea of faces and saw her own fear reflected back, fear of judgment, fear of shame, fear of being defined by the worst thing that had ever happened to her. Then she began to speak. "My name is Amara," she said, "and 6 months ago, my brother's wife burned me with a hot iron because she was jealous." The room went silent. "I want to tell you this story not to make you pity me, but to help you recognize something that I didn't see until it was too late. The signs of a person who is dangerous not because they are evil by nature, but because they have allowed poison to grow in their heart unchecked." For the next 30 minutes, Amara spoke. She told them about the small cruelties that came before the big one, the harsh words, the impossible standards, the constant criticism. She explained how she had made excuses, had blamed herself, had stayed silent because she didn't want to cause trouble. "I learned something terrible that day," she said, her voice steady now. "I learned that kindness without boundaries is not virtue, it's vulnerability. I learned that keeping peace at any cost sometimes costs you everything. I learned that the person who hurts you will always have a reason that sounds good to them, but that doesn't make the hurt acceptable." Women in the audience nodded, some wiping tears. They recognized the story because they had lived versions of it, not always with physical violence, but with emotional torture, with psychological abuse, with the slow erosion of self-worth that happens when someone decides you are the enemy. "But I also learned something beautiful," Amara continued, and her voice warmed with genuine emotion. "I learned that I am stronger than I ever knew. I learned that my voice matters. I learned that surviving something terrible doesn't make you broken, it makes you a warrior." She held up her scarred arm, no longer hiding it. "This scar is ugly," she said, "but it's also proof that I survived, proof that cruelty did not kill me, proof that I am here, standing, speaking, living. And every woman in this room who has survived something terrible carries scars too, some on the skin, most in the heart. Those scars are not shame, they are testimony." The applause was thunderous. After her speech, women lined up to speak with her, to share their own stories, to thank her for giving voice to pain they had carried in silence. Some showed their own scars, cigarette burns from angry husbands, belt marks from violent fathers, the invisible wounds of words that cut deeper than any blade. Mama Nneka stood at the back of the hall, tears streaming down her weathered face, proud beyond measure of this young woman who had transformed her trauma into teaching. That evening, As they returned to humans, Amara asked the question she had been holding for months. "Mama, do you think Belinda has changed?" Mama Nneka was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, my daughter. I hope so. But change is a difficult thing, especially when it requires someone to look honestly at the monster they became." They both knew that Belinda had been sentenced to 18 months in prison for assault. The judge had been harsh, saying that domestic violence, whether between spouses or family members, would not be tolerated in a civilized society. Belinda's lawyer had argued for leniency, pointing to her remorse, her clean record, her youth. But the judge had looked at the photographs of Amara's burn and said simply, "Actions have consequences. Perhaps time in prison will teach her what her upbringing did not, that other people are not toys to break when you feel frustrated." Belinda was now 6 months into that sentence. She had sent letters to Amara, 3 of them. Amara had read the first one and put the others aside, unopened. The first letter had been full of apologies, of explanations, of desperate pleas for forgiveness. But Amara wasn't ready. Maybe she never would be. And that was okay too. Forgiveness, Mama Nneka had told her, is not something you owe to your abuser. It's something you give yourself when carrying hatred becomes too heavy. But it must come in its own time if it comes at all. No one can force you to forgive, not even God. Meanwhile, Chike had his own journey of healing. He had moved to a new house, unable to bear living in the place where his sister had been tortured. He threw himself into his work, earning a promotion that he barely celebrated. At night, he lay awake replaying all the signs he had missed: Belinda's coldness, Amara's growing fear, the subtle ways the household had become toxic while he remained oblivious. The guilt was a constant companion. One evening, Amara visited him for dinner. It was the first time they had shared a meal in his new place. The conversation was careful at first, dancing around the elephant in the room, until finally Chike set down his fork and said what he had been holding for months. "I failed you, Amara. I brought you into that house, and I didn't protect you. I will carry that shame for the rest of my life." Amara reached across the table and took his hand, her scarred hand holding his trembling one. "Brother," she said gently, "you didn't fail me. You trusted someone you loved. That's not a failure, that's being human. Belinda is the one who failed. Belinda is the one who chose cruelty over kindness. You cannot protect people from dangers you cannot see." "But I should have seen." "How?" Amara's voice was firm now. "She hid it from you. She performed for you. She became a different person the moment you left the house. Unless you had eyes in the back of your head or cameras in every room, you couldn't have known. And even if you had suspected, what would you have done? Called her jealous? Scolded her? Would that have prevented what happened?" Chike had no answer. "The only person responsible for what Belinda did is Belinda," Amara continued. "She made a choice. She chose violence, and now she's facing the consequences of that choice. But you, brother, you need to forgive yourself, because I have already forgiven you." Those last words broke something open in Chike's chest. He wept like he hadn't wept since he was a child, and Amara held him, this strong man who had tried so hard to be everything to everyone and felt like he had failed catastrophically. They healed together that night, brother and sister, bound by blood and trauma and the determination to not let bitterness poison what remained of their lives. As the months continued to pass, the story of what happened in Chike's house became woven into the fabric of Yuman's oral history. Elders used it to teach young women about the dangers of unchecked jealousy. Mothers used it to remind their daughters that marriage was not a competition, that another woman's gifts did not diminish their own. Pastors used it to preach about the importance of emotional health, about seeking help before anger turned into action, about the difference between feeling jealous, which is human, and acting on jealousy, which is sin. And slowly, painfully, the story transformed from a scandal into a proverb. "Do not feed the snake of jealousy," elders began to say, "or one day it will turn and bite you." The home that ignores injustice invites fire to its roof. When you burn another person, your own hands carry the scar forever. These sayings spread beyond humans, carried by travelers and traders, by family members who moved to other villages, by young people who went to universities and brought the story with them. Within a year, people across the state knew about that woman who burned her husband's sister. Belinda's name became synonymous with a cautionary tale. Inside the prison, Belinda heard about her new reputation through letters from her mother. Each one was a fresh wound, learning that she had become a byword for wickedness, that children were warned not to be like her, that her name was spoken with disgust. But slowly, painfully, Belinda began to change. Not because of the punishment alone rarely transforms anyone, but because in the forced silence and isolation of prison, with no one to perform for and nowhere to hide from herself, Belinda had to finally confront the truth of what she had become. She attended the mandatory counseling sessions. At first, she went through the motions, saying what the counselor wanted to hear. But gradually, week by week, the walls came down. She talked about her childhood, how she was always compared to her more accomplished sister, how she never felt good enough, how she learned to derive her worth from other people's approval. She talked about her marriage, how she had expected it to complete her, to make her whole, to prove that she was valuable. She talked about Amara, how seeing someone who was naturally good without trying had felt like a personal attack, a reminder of everything Belinda wasn't. "I built my entire identity on being the best," she told the counselor one day, 6 months into her sentence. "The best daughter, the best wife, the best woman in the room. And when Amara came and people praised her without her even trying, it destroyed me. Because if she was good without effort, what did that say about all my effort? That your worth was never tied to your performance in the first place," the counselor replied gently. "That you were trying to earn something you already had, value as a human being." It was a simple statement, but it cracked open something in Belinda's chest that had been locked for decades. She began to write in a journal, processing her emotions instead of suppressing them. She wrote letters of apology, not just to Amara, but to her parents, to Chike, to herself. She didn't send most of them, but writing them was part of the healing. And slowly, painfully, Belinda began to understand the difference between regret and remorse. Regret was wishing you hadn't been caught. Remorse was wishing you hadn't done it in the first place. She moved from one to the other like a caterpillar moving toward metamorphosis. Ugly, difficult, but necessary. 12 months into her sentence, Belinda was allowed a visitor. She expected her mother or perhaps her father. Instead, it was someone she had never expected to see again. Chike. He sat across from her in the visiting room, separated by a table and an ocean of pain. His face was harder than she remembered, the boyish softness replaced by something weathered and wary. They looked at each other in silence for a long moment. "Why are you here?" Belinda finally asked, her voice small. "I don't know," Chike admitted. "Part of me wanted to see if you had changed. Part of me needed to tell you something face to face." "What?" "That I forgive you." Belinda's eyes filled with tears. "You shouldn't, I don't deserve." "I'm not doing it for you," Chike interrupted. "I'm doing it for me, because carrying hatred for you was killing me slowly. It was poison in my blood, affecting everything, my work, my relationships, my peace. So I'm letting it go, not because you earned it, but because I need to be free of it." Belinda nodded, understanding the difference. "How is she? How is Amara?" "She's remarkable," Chike said, and there was pride in his voice. "She's speaking at conferences, helping other women, building a life. She's stronger than either of us ever knew." "I robbed her of so much," Belinda whispered. "Yes, you did, and that can never be undone. But Amara is not letting what you did define her. She's using it to become something more. That's her choice. Your choice is what you do with the rest of your life when you get out of here." "I don't know who I'll be," Belinda admitted. "Everything I was before, wife, respected woman, church member, it's all gone." "Good," Chike said firmly. "That person burned an innocent girl. Let her stay dead. Build someone new, someone better. Someone who understands that other people's light doesn't diminish her own." He stood to leave, then paused. "Belinda, I loved you once. I want you to know that. What I felt for you was real. But that love died the day you chose cruelty over humanity. It can never be resurrected. Do you understand?" "Yes," Belinda whispered. "I understand." "Then use that understanding. Be better. Not for me, not for Amara, but for the next person whose life you touch. Make sure they never have reason to fear you." He left without looking back. Belinda returned to her cell and cried for hours, not tears of self-pity, but tears of genuine grief for the life she had destroyed, the person she had hurt, the woman she had been. And in that grief, something genuine began to grow. 3 months later, Belinda was released on good behavior. She returned to her parents' house, but she didn't stay long. The judgment in the eyes of villagers, the whispers that followed her, the children who were warned away from her, it was too much. She moved to Lagos, to the anonymity of a city where no one knew her story. She found work in a factory, humble work that paid little but asked no questions. She rented a single room and lived simply, quietly, trying to rebuild a life from ashes. She never tried to contact Amara again. That door was closed, and she accepted it. But she volunteered at a women's shelter, working with victims of domestic violence, listening to their stories, offering what wisdom she had earned through her own terrible choices. "I was an abuser," she told the women in group therapy one evening, her voice steady. "Not in the same way some of you experienced, but I hurt someone who trusted me. I let jealousy turn me into a monster. And I want you to know that the person who hurt you probably has reasons in their mind for why they did it, reasons that sound justified to them. But those reasons don't matter. Hurt is hurt. Cruelty is cruelty. And no one deserves to be burned, beaten, or broken because someone else can't control their emotions." The women listened, some hostile at first. Why should they hear from an abuser? But gradually warming to her honesty, her refusal to make excuses, her genuine remorse. Slowly, painfully, Belinda built something new. Not redemption exactly. Some acts are too severe for full redemption, but a life of service that at least counted for something. She would never be who she was. That woman was dead and buried. But she could be someone who helped others avoid the path she had walked. It wasn't much, but it was something. Back in Humans, 2 years after the burning, Amara stood in front of a new house, small but hers, paid for with her own salary, built with her own determination. Chaik came to the housewarming with gifts and laughter, relieved to see his sister thriving. Mama Nneka brought a pot of soup and blessings. Neighbors came with congratulations and genuine warmth. As Amara stood in her living room, surrounded by people who loved her, she looked down at her scarred arm. The mark was permanent. Plastic surgery could only do so much. She would carry it forever. But she had stopped seeing it as a symbol of her victimization. Now she saw it as a reminder that she had survived, that she was stronger than she knew, that cruelty had tried to break her and failed. "Amara," Mama Nneka said, pulling her aside, "I want to tell you something the elders have decided." "What is it, Mama?" "Your story, what happened to you, it has become a teaching tool across this region. Young women know it. They reference it. They use it to identify danger in their own lives. And because of that, we believe several women have left toxic situations before they became violent. You saved them, Amara. Your willingness to speak, to not hide in shame, has saved others." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "I never wanted to be famous for this." "I know, child, but sometimes God uses our worst moments to create the greatest good. Your suffering was not meaningless. It became a light for others." That night, as Amara lay in her new bed in her new house, she thought about the journey she had walked. From the frightened girl who arrived at her brother's house with nothing, to the victim of unspeakable cruelty, to the survivor who refused to let trauma define her. She thought about Belinda, not with hatred anymore, but with a kind of sad wisdom. Belinda had taught her something important, though not in the way a teacher should. She had taught her that people can be destroyed by their own emotions if they don't learn to master them. She had taught her that jealousy, left unchecked, becomes a fire that consumes everything, most of all the person who harbors it. She had taught her that family is not always safe, that trust must be earned continuously, and that kindness without boundaries is vulnerability in disguise. These were hard lessons, learned in fire and pain. But they were lessons that would protect Amara for the rest of her life. As sleep began to claim her, Amara whispered a prayer, not for revenge, not for justice, those had already come, but for healing. For herself, for Chaik, and yes, even for Belinda. Because in the end, they were all wounded by what had happened. And wounds, if tended properly, can become the strongest parts of us. The next morning, in a village gathering, Chief Okonkwo stood before a group of young couples preparing for marriage. At 93 now, his time was growing short, but his voice was still strong. "Let me tell you a story," he began, "about a woman who came to her brother's house with innocent hands." And the story was told again, passed down, preserved in the oral tradition that had kept African wisdom alive for millennia. But this time, Chief Okonkwo added a new ending, an ending only time had revealed. The woman who was burned became a teacher. The woman who burned became a lesson. The brother who was blind became watchful, and the village that witnessed evil learned to recognize it before it struck again. He paused, letting his words settle over the young couples. "Remember this, children. The home that ignores injustice invites fire to its roof. The marriage that tolerates cruelty becomes a prison, and the person who feeds jealousy will eventually be consumed by it." He looked at each face, young and hopeful, preparing to build new homes and new lives. Build your marriages on truth, not performance. Build them on honest communication, not silent suffering. Build them on mutual respect, not competition. And if you see darkness growing in your heart, jealousy, rage, bitterness, do not hide it. Seek help. Talk to elders. Talk to counselors. Talk to your God. Because untreated wounds in the soul become weapons that hurt everyone around you. The young people nodded solemnly, understanding that they had just received wisdom bought with blood and fire. As the gathering dispersed, one young woman approached Chief Okonkwo privately. "Chief," she said hesitantly, "I have been feeling jealous of my husband's attention to his sister. Reading about what happened to Amara frightened me. I don't want to become that kind of woman. What should I do?" Chief Okonkwo smiled, pleased. This was the fruit of the story, not just warning but prevention. "Child," he said gently, "the fact that you recognize it and seek help means you are already walking a different path than Belinda walked. Come. Let me connect you with Mama Nkuru. She counsels women on these matters. And remember, feeling jealous is human. Acting on jealousy with cruelty is choice. You can choose differently." The young woman left with hope instead of shame, with help instead of silence. And that was how Amara's story saved another life. Years would pass, decades. The principles would age and eventually die, as all humans do. But the story would remain. Passed from grandmother to granddaughter. From mother to son. From elder to youth. A story about jealousy and cruelty, about suffering and survival, about justice and redemption. A story that asked important questions. How do we handle emotions that threaten to overwhelm us? How do we build homes that are safe for everyone in them? How do we recognize danger before it strikes? How do we survive when trust is betrayed? And how do we transform our wounds into wisdom? These questions would echo through generations, and the story of Amara and Belinda would provide one possible answer. Not the only answer, but an important one. That evil must be confronted, not excused. That victims must be believed and protected. That justice, though painful, is necessary. That healing is possible, though it takes time. And that even the worst moments of our lives can become teaching tools for others, if we are brave enough to speak the truth instead of hiding in shame. This, then, is how an African folktale is born, not from fantasy or imagination, but from the real, raw, terrible, beautiful truth of human experience. This is how lessons are preserved, not in books that gather dust, but in stories that are told and retold, each time slightly different, each time adapted to the listener, but always carrying the same essential wisdom. And this is how we honor those who suffer, not by pitying them, but by learning from them, by allowing their pain to prevent ours, by transforming their trauma into communal teaching. Amara's scar would fade with time, but the lesson it taught would remain forever. The home that ignores injustice invites fire to its roof. Jealousy, if fed and nurtured, becomes a living thing that will eventually consume not just its target, but the person who harbored it. Build your homes on truth, not silence. Build your marriages on respect, not competition. And if darkness grows in your heart, seek help before it becomes action, because some fires, once started, can never be fully extinguished. This is TJ Stories, where African wisdom meets modern truth. If this story touched you, moved you, or taught you something, subscribe, like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's learn from each other. And remember, your voice matters, your story matters, and speaking up might just save someone's life. Until the next story, may your homes be filled with peace, your hearts with wisdom, and your lives with justice tempered by mercy. DL letter 1E5. Nagode. Thank you. Letter 1EB9, letter 1E63E. Copyright TJ Stories, African Folktales for Modern Times.